Well, good evening. I'm George Kilpatrick. This is the United Democrats of Onondaga County, and we're pleased to be joined by Assemblywoman Pamela Hunter. She represents the 128th Assembly District, and she's also a history maker. She is the new chair of the Onondaga County Democratic Committee, the first African American, the first person of color to hold that position. And tonight we'll be talking to Pam not only about her assembly race, which you're running unopposed, but okay, that's a good thing, right? And also we'll be talking to her about her plans for the Democratic Party. And we'll learn a little bit more about her background. But by the way, you should know that this is not just about me and Pam, it's also about you. So as you know, each and every week, you have the opportunity to ask questions in the box below. You can ask your questions live. We're here tonight on Monday night, October the 15th, and your opportunity to ask Pamela Hunter, Assemblywoman. I gotta be like formal, right? I know her as Pam, but yeah, I have to say Assemblywoman or Madam Chair, woman, right? All of that. You want your honorifics, don't you?
I earned them.
Yes, you did.
I did earn them.
Yes.
But people usually just call me Pam.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, Pam, you are a veteran. So let's talk about your background. You served in the U.S. Army.
Yes, I did. Actually, just kind of a interesting note, I am the only female veteran in the whole state legislature. So
Really?
The Senate and the Assembly, it's just me.
Just you.
Representing women veterans. And, you know, it's an honor, quite frankly, to be the chair of the subcommittee for women veterans, where I was talking about issues that surround women veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Many times, people think the conversation is just around military sexual trauma, which is very, very important.
Sure.
And we do have conversations about that, but it also includes conversations about employment and homelessness. Many of those things affect women veterans, and we want to make sure attention relative to that is called upon as well.
So you know I work with Vera House. So you said military sexual trauma. I got to ask you, how are we doing? Are we doing better?
In some ways, we are doing better, quite frankly. I think that, especially in this Me Too movement, more people feel empowered to come forward. But we definitely need to do a better job after someone does come forward, and then what? Because you're in a vulnerable state, and we've seen that especially relative to the whole Kavanaugh hearing. And if you haven't gone through the whole healing process, it just brings up old memories again. Many people, especially in the military, have PTSD as it relates to, you know, sexual trauma as well. So it's something, it's very sensitive. To me, it's never a question of why didn't you, you know, and why did it take so long? It's we're here now, and what can we do to be helpful for people who experience that going forward.
Military background, or did you have military in your family, or is this something that you just wanted to do?
Interestingly enough, my brother was in the United States Army. He then went, he was an MP in the Army, that was a police officer, and then he went on to be a U.S. Federal Marshal. And I thought that I was going to college right after high school. I got accepted to college, and I thought I'm going to be a chef, and this is going to be wonderful. And I got accepted at Johnson & Wales, and I knew I was going off to Rhode Island. And my parents were like, wait a minute. You need your parents to fill out that FAFSA form. Let me tell you, I'm going through that, you know, right now, obviously with my son. He's just a first year, you know, freshman in college. And that was not something that was available to me at that time with, you know, the parent interaction getting me into college. And so by kind of default, I said, I'm going to go into the military. I was only 17 years old. I graduated high school when I was 17. I actually didn't turn 18 until November.
You have a late birthday. I was wondering about that, yeah.
Yes, and so I went to basic training, graduated from basic training, was at my permanent duty station all before my 18th birthday. So that's kind of, you know, a huge thing for someone who's not even old enough to vote.
And you were honorably discharged.
I was. I had a great time in the military. I think the experience definitely provided leadership skills for me, discipline. You know, anybody who knows me knows that I am, you know, always on time. It's just to a fault. And I think that, you know, as it's been kind of interwoven into my life, it's been a really good experience. I am proud to be a veteran, obviously proud to have been a woman veteran. But that's not my only, you know, flag that I carry. Obviously, that there's many others, but very proud of
All right,
that.
well, let's wave some flags. So what other flags are you carrying?
I'm a mom, obviously. That's a big flag that I carry of an 18-year-old son. He just went off to college this past August, his first year. He goes, to community college that's not too far away from here. I was happy to, kind of get him out and flourishing. But having a child that actually went through the public school system here in the city of Syracuse, that's near and dear to me. If you want to talk about public education, if you want to talk about funding of public education,
Sure.
if you want to talk about graduation rates, if you want to talk about discipline, if you want to talk about, what's going on in our city schools, I lived it and breathed it every single day, not as Pam, a city councilor, Pam, New York City
Pam, the
Assembly.
parent, right?
Pam Hunter is calling for her son, wanting to know, what's going on in the classroom. And, it's really important. I think that as a mom in the role that I have, and it's great honor and privilege and responsibility that I definitely take very seriously, but being a mom is important. That's an important role too. And, it's hard if people don't have the means to advocate and kind of navigate a system, especially if your child needs extra services, navigate if there might be mental health issues, or even if this myriad of socioeconomic issues that we have, here in the city. But it's not just for the city. Even though I do represent Liverpool and the Onondaga and DeWitt, there are issues in every one of those municipalities that I represent. And many of the issues surround where pockets of poverty reside. And so that's the other flag, obviously, that I carry.
Well, you are such a mind reader, because I was thinking, okay, tell us what the districts are. So you just did that.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you about one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now, poverty. And now I guess I read somewhere today where we're linking some of that to some of the community trauma around violence that we've been seeing.
It's evident, George, is, one of the, things that sticks with me, especially as I work through my district, is I see that a lot of the pockets of poverty relate to where people rent. And then many instances where people rent, it's not where people should even be living. In some places it's in, people live in squalor. And if you live in a place that doesn't have insulation, if you live in a place that windows aren't, what it needs to be, if you live in a place that's not in a safe neighborhood, if you live, in a place where you're worried about being evicted, which is a huge problem, or even, foreclosed upon, that causes a lot of different stress, not just for adults to carry, but obviously that's what children carry as well. In Albany, since I've been, on the Assembly, one of the biggest things I talk about, interestingly enough, now my colleagues in New York City attribute me to deer ticks and poverty. And, unfortunately, unfortunately, these are two huge issues that affect my constituency. And, people outside of our area need to know that we have real issues affecting the people where we live.
But it's per capita, right? I mean, I'm not diminishing, but I mean, New York, they certainly have neighborhoods that will be a little bit more challenging, perhaps, maybe?
Well, poverty is throughout the United States.
Yes,
that
it
is correct.
Right.
And I would say someone who's impoverished, who lives in the city of New York, might have a rent-stabilized apartment where that's not something that we have the opportunity to have here. Yes, they have huge amounts of NYCHA, public housing in New York City, where many people who live in poverty, and they have their own issues too, with brownouts, with issues relative to lead, issues relating to, rats and bed bugs and all of the things people here in poverty. And I care about that, but quite frankly, I care about the people in our district. And if we don't get the resources that we need, because poverty is poverty, but poverty is enormous in a place where you're just constantly coming from behind, and people need to know about it.
Some people, we're talking to Pam Hunter, Assemblywoman Pam Hunter. A couple of questions are coming in. We're going to get to you in just a second. I just want to, obviously within the district, even within the city of Syracuse, we've also seen community violence related to teenagers, especially. And people are not sure how to respond or what to do. It's not an overnight solution, but certainly whether you live in the city or whether you live in the county, if you're not feeling this last month and what's been going on, you live in the city, you understand. How do we wrap our hands around it? Maybe that's the best way for me to approach this issue.
It's a tough problem, George, really tough problem. And, it hits me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mom of a young Black child. And when he comes home from college and he says, can I use the car
I'm
and,
gonna run around, yeah.
I'm gonna see my friends, don't think that it doesn't give a mom pause to think, could this affect my life, my child?
Right.
So it's real.
Yeah.
Knowing that your child could leave and you not see him again. And so that stays with you when they go to school.
Mm-hmm.
It stays with you when you want them to, be able to live their life as young people and have friends and be out in the community. It's tough. It's like you want to embrace all young people and just bring them close and hug them and say, I got you, and cover them. But it takes more. In addition to thoughts and prayers and being able to, reach out and hug your neighbor. I think, as we peel back the layers, a lot of this has to do with hopelessness, and it really goes back to the foundation of quality of education. It needs to be there. Opportunities for people to be up out of poverty and have gainful, meaningful employment. So where it transcends from working parents to providing a steady, stable roof over, someone's house, to having quality education for a child during the day. Those are enormous. Those are huge things. And I think that the symptoms, are just escalating and escalating, and it unfortunately manifests itself into violence, and it has to stop. And people are saying, I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. It can't, it has to stop. And people are housing murderers in their homes.
And they know it. So
you gotta say something. You have to speak up. I know it's difficult, and you love your kids, and you love your nephew and your cousin, and you don't want them to, have to be a part of the criminal justice system. But if we don't feel empowered to speak up and speak out on what we know is an injustice, we can speak up and speak out, because Kavanaugh is a sexual assaulter. We can speak up and speak out, when...
But we can get crazy about all of that.
We can get crazy. We need to be speaking up and speaking out.
Or passionate is the word I want to say, yeah, right? But let's be passionate about this thing right here within our own community.
This is where we live.
I promised you I would get to you, and I will. And so just let me tell you that we're talking with Assemblywoman Pam Hunter. We got a lot to talk about. Pam is also the new chair of the Onondaga County Democratic Committee. She has 3 priority areas that she wants to tell us. Give us those 3 areas without detail.
Yes.
We'll get to the detail later, but then I get to you. All right. 3
Wanting to ensure our democracy.
Okay.
Obviously, as a chair of the Democratic Committee, we need to have principle.
Okay.
And
We'll
as far as
expand later.
party principles,
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we work on community engagement.
All right. So democracy, party principles, and discipline, and community engagement.
Yes.
More to come. Speaking of elections or reform, Justin wants to know, are there any election reforms you would support in New York State?
Absolutely. I've been a huge supporter of expanding voting rights. I think that people need to have immediate, registration. I think people need to be able to, vote early. you don't want to say often, you know,
Right,
vote early.
right.
People need to, you know, make sure that the barriers that they have been going through to be disenfranchised, we don't want to be in North Carolina and in Georgia.
Wow, well, you see what's happening in Georgia?
We should not be surprised, George. Stop.
So, for those that don't know, real quick, Secretary of State, who's also running for governor, has not processed the estimates of like 50,000, over 50,000 that just sitting there, and many of them, guess who is sitting in that pile waiting to be registered? What did they say? Over 70% or so African Americans. So, this is a real problem.
It is. So, being able to, that's our constitutional right for us to be able to exercise to vote, and so making it easier, not more difficult, is very important. So, you know, people should. There are other states who obviously are able to get this done right, and you have more expansive voting. You have more people participating in the process. When we say from our primary, we've had more people, you know, voting than we've had voting before, and that number is not to 50% or 60 or 70 or 80 or 100%. It's still not enough.
So when you say you support, has there anything come before the assembly around?
Oh, yeah.
And where does it get stuck in the Senate, or what happens?
Yes.
Okay. Which is why.
Yes.
Yes. The Democratic Party wants reforms, and that might be one more reason.
But let me tell you something, George, because I think, you know, that there is, I don't want to say miseducation, but I think that we need to be honest in our conversations relative to any issue, whether we're talking about voting, immigration, reproductive rights, if we're talking about healthcare, if we're talking about any issue that we feel are democratic and that people are really, you know, passionate about. Don't think that every Democrat believes people should be able to vote early, because they don't. Okay. And you can't think every Democrat wants expanded, you know, voting, because they don't. Every Democrat doesn't want reproductive rights codified, because they don't. And so that's something, when we're having conversations, especially outside of New York City, where majority members, majority means majority in the assembly are Democrats, they can easily vote for bills, yes, and be done with it. In upstate, central, western, you know, New York, where it's not necessarily so easy to just say, yes, on principle, I'm voting for this because inherently I believe this is the right thing. It's not what inherently I believe. It's what my constituency is advocating for. And sometimes the constituency around here is not necessarily 100% for every, you know, Democratic ideology that we think that where they should be, maybe.
And that's also part of a healthy democracy and a healthy debate, right? I mean,
yes.
Everybody. But essentially, though, for expanding the opportunity for people to vote, I think we would all agree with that would be something that would be of benefit. We would think, but
yes,
we would think.
Yes.
Dave wants to know, what are your thoughts about Dana Balter?
Dana Balter's awesome. I think that, you know, we have a very strong chance of being able to win this congressional seat. We have just a few weeks left to get this push in. I think that the momentum has been building. The momentum has been surrounding the campaign. I didn't think that she would lose that primary at all. You know, I thought that she had that in the bag. My biggest concern, obviously, was in November, and that's where we are right now. And quite frankly, we need all of you to get out there and do the best that you can, you know, to get out there and vote in November. This is, if we're talking about democracy, this is where it rests and lies right here on November 6th. And so we have a candidate in Dana who is impassioned about issues, who, you know, is smart, you know, very intelligent woman who has put her heart and soul into running this race. And we definitely need to do all we can to be supportive and get her through the finish line.
All right, just reminding you once again, if you have a question for Assemblywoman Pam Hunter, who is the chair of the Onondaga County Democratic Committee, you can type it in right now. We're at Facebook Live Monday night, the 15th of October in Onondaga County. And we're actually at the OCDC headquarters,
we are,
as it turns out. Okay, so you talked about 3 priorities as the chair of the Democratic Party here. So let's talk about ensuring our democracy. How do you want to do that?
For several months, I was able to have many conversations with Democrats, Democratic committee members, about where we are with our party.
Okay.
And I think that many people have felt like their voices have not been heard. Many people feel like that they have been left out of the process.
Okay.
And we need to be able to provide a place and space for democracy to happen. Not just to say that it's important, but to be able to live that ideal. And that means being able to have forums and conversations where people can come together and talk about issues and candidates. So where people don't think that decisions are being made in silos, that they're being made by, and we're talking about committee members now. This is an actual organization by the 600 committee members that are part of this organization, that they all feel empowered to be a part of the conversation and process. And that's what ensuring our democracy is all about.
You know what occurred to me? I didn't ask this. Why did you want to be chair?
Well, you know, what is the saying? If not me, who? You know, if not now, when? But, you know, really, our democracy is at stake. And this is very concerning to me. And, you know, yes, this is a volunteer opportunity. And yes, you know, this is in addition to, obviously, my very, you know, significant responsibility of being an assembly person. But I wanted to be a part of the solution, a part of moving things in a positive direction forward. You know, I think it's easy, especially for politicians sometimes, to sit on the sideline and say, we should.
Right.
And I didn't want to be the we should. I wanted to be part of the I will. And I was very particular about saying I will. We will, you know, together, that it's not just about what Pam Hunter thinks and what Pam Hunter wants. It's what, you know, this Democratic committee as a whole wants to move forward. I mean, we will not win more expansive races if we don't coalesce and, you know, get together. And I think that we definitely have an opportunity to be able to do that.
A couple more things to get to on your priorities, but let me ask you about the struggle for what the Democratic Party is in Onondaga County. You know, there are some who, if you think of what's going on nationally, who feel like more of the left and more of that should be part of the platform. And then there was, I'm thinking back to when Clinton and Hillary and those guys, it was the Democratic Leadership Council, which is more of a centrist, right? And so who are the Democrats?
The Democrats are all of us. You know, I think that
left, center, right, whatever you want to be.
I'm not a label, and I will not sit here and say I'm a democratic socialist. I'm not going to say I'm a progressive. I won't say I'm a moderate.
That's the one I want. That's the one
I'm a centrist. I'm a Democrat. And, you know, it's interesting because when you kind of peel back the layers and you get to, you know, talking to people and saying, you know, where are you? Like, how are you this label? And, well, I want expanded voting rights. Well, I want that too.
Right.
Well, I want immigration reform. Well, okay, I want that too. Well, I want health care. Well, I want the health care too. And when you keep going about layers and layers, it's like, well, we want the same thing. It's about strategy and tactics, quite frankly, sometimes, and how we get there. And I think that there is room for all of that, quite frankly. But then that comes to party discipline. So while we're exercising our democracy and we're having spaces where people can talk and be active and put their best, you know, advocacy forward, at the end of the day, and we're talking about these 600, you know, members of this Democratic Party, we are part of an organized entity that is here to promote, identify, promote, support candidates. And those candidates come by way of designation, and those candidates come by way of winning primaries, and then, you know, ultimately, obviously, general elections. And then we want them to get reelected. And so that's where party, you know, discipline comes in, that we really need to be able to get in a space. And I feel like if we do what we need to do on the expanding and exercising democracy side, that we will move people as far as this Democratic committee process to really be involved in party discipline. Because at the end of the day, you know, let me just turn my hat around a little bit, you know, for my assembly hat, resources are dwindling. To think that, you know, there's going to be all this extra money, you know, floating around, especially, you know, for a city like Syracuse that, you know, is cash strapped. We have a 2% property tax cap that, you know, is really constricting municipalities. Conversations relative to how municipalities will operate is very serious. And sometimes if you don't have enough money, you have to, shed, some of the things that you're doing or collaborate or consolidate. And that's really, that might be better.
It's restarting. We lost all of like that last 20 seconds. So
Okay.
let's restart.
So I was asking if primaries aren't necessarily bad.
Right. And they're not. And I think that, if you think about, I want to run against, this person because I think what I'm doing or what I can do might be better in some ways. I think it's, what are we gaining by having that primary conversation? And also, what are we willing to risk having primaries? And those are real conversations, because money is not easy to come by in elections. And so if we're willing to expend it all in order to turn around and, like in some cases, like our congressional primary raise, it's hard to raise $1 million. It's hard to raise a significant amount. And if you spend it all one time, you have to gain it all back.
But if the primary winner, who wasn't the party designate, wins, the party gets behind the primary winner.
Yeah, that's what party discipline is about, quite frankly. It's fair and square. We let democracy reign. We let everyone exercise their opportunity. And the voters spoke. And the voters said, this is what we want.
This is what we want.
The party. We're talking about the 600 member of the Democratic Party who go out there and engage the community about, the ideals and the things that are going on in the Democratic Party. That's the expectation of being part of the Democratic Party.
You also said that you would like to see community engagement.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Well, we have seen elections aren't just, in November and they come and go. Elections have been lasting all year long, and we need to engage people all year long. And then able to do that, we need to make sure that community residents, voters are knowledgeable factually about the issues surrounding them. So it's being able to, again, create spaces so where people can, have forums, can have conversations, gather information so they can bring it back to the folks in the community.
So on Wednesday night,
yes,
there is going to be a blue wave coming.
Blue Rally, yes.
What's going on?
Our Go Blue Rally. It's our annual Go Blue Rally, our 7th annual, at 6 o'clock at the Palace Theater. It's really exciting. We'll have all of our Democratic candidates who are running in the general election, including our Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul and our State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli will be in attendance as well. And it's an exciting time to just come and rally. It's not about speeches. It's not about hearing people talking and talking. It's about saying, we are rallying and we're going to, bring it home on November 6th.
There's a suggested donation of $25 going to the Onondaga County Democratic Committee. And do you want people to RSVP or call to tell us?
They can RSVP.
Tell not us, but tell you, not me.
Yep, they can RSVP at ocdemocrats.com. I believe we have an Eventbrite. You can do it on our Facebook page as well, or just show up to the Palace at 6 o'clock.
On Wednesday night, that is October the 17th.
Yes.
What's going to be the key to getting out the vote, getting out the Democrats for November the 6th?
We just need to keep the momentum going. Obviously, as I had stated, we had a great, turnout in September for the primary, and September was a ways away from, November. I think that we're seeing a lot of nasty commercials now. I think that this is the season, and this is what happens. They pull the trigger, and here it comes, unleashing. But I think that people need to weed through the negativity and say what is important to you. And it's like each one, reach one, take one, drag them, to the polls, quite frankly, because this affects all of us. If you don't think, that us not having a majority in the House is important, you are mistaken, because we're talking about, decisions relative to healthcare, relative to the budget, relative to immigration, relative to infrastructure, relative to everything you care about. We need to have people in place who are in office, who are who are taking care of the ideals that we believe in.
Quickly, you're going to be reelected at no opponent. So what are you going to work on in January?
I'm going to continue to working on, the key 3 areas that resonate, regardless that I have the highest concentration of poverty of people of color and have one of the best, school districts in the country in Jamesville DeWitt. At the end of the day, people want gainful employment. People want to be able to go out there and know that they have good, steady income, and a job and an employer that's going to be around. That, is one of my main focuses, to make sure that we have employers for today, and for the future. I want to make sure that our education system is what it needs to be. Every single young person deserves quality education, regardless if you live in the inner city or if you go to, you know, one of the suburban schools. It's very important that we have a funding formula, you know, that works.
My producer, let me just do one more thing. What would you like to see with Shopping Town?
You know, quite frankly, when I first moved here 20 years ago, it was like a jumping.
It was like the move, right.
Wonderful metropolis. But I think, you know, DeWitt has put in a lot of resources. I have supported, I have given capital dollars, you know, relative to kind of a renaissance, so to speak. And I think a kind of brick and mortar closed shell building as it is today, I don't necessarily think that's what it's going to look like. I think that you have the Erie Canal, you know, have that waterway, you know, going through. I think that they're going to, you know, expand upon that. And I think a lot more openness and green space is definitely what's going to be happening going forward.
Well, thank you, Assemblywoman Pam Hunter, who is the chair of the Onondaga County Democratic Committee. She's running unopposed. Election day is November 6th. Remember to vote. And Pam, good luck.
Thank you.
And remember the Blue Wave, Wednesday, October 17th, 6
Our
o'clock.
Go Blue rally, yes.
And the Go Blue rally on October 17th, 6 o'clock at the Palace Theater in Eastwood. Is that your district too?
No.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.